Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week we take a look at the 1988 film The Blob. This is episode 367, and if you go back into our archives, we have recorded a review of the original The Blob, so I might even post that on the page. Okay, bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Savaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Hey, how's it going?
How is it going? Indeed, I'm just happy to hear your voice and hear everybody back. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, currently published by Amazon and Comixology. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Well, I guess I killed the strawberry jam.
And the original one actually, it looked like strawberry jam, didn't it? And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from the one, the only Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. The Blob, this movie, The Blob, is a 1988 American sci-fi horror film co-written and directed by Chuck Russell. It's a remake of the 1958 film. It stars Shawnee Smith, Kevin Dillon, Donovan Leitch, Jeffrey DeMunn, Paul McCrane, and Candy Clark. The plot follows an acidic amoeba-like organism that crashes to Earth in, this is a spoiler, a military satellite, which devours and dissolves anything in its path as it grows. Julia was pointing out that apparently it is basically an inside-out stomach that's just wandering around, dissolving things. This movie was made in Abbeville, Louisiana. It came out in August 1988 from TriStar. It actually, at the box office, didn't do well, but I run into a lot of people who really love this movie. So I'm looking forward to discussing The Blob, especially because I know that some of the people who love this movie are the people on the cast of the show. So let's get our opening thoughts. We'll go Tony, Julia, Drew, and then I'll go. Tony, you get to ring it in. You get to start us off. I don't even know, by the way, if we're going to follow this up with the only Blob movie we haven't covered, which is Beware the Blob. The Blob, what are your thoughts?
I really dig this movie. I've loved it for a long time. It also holds a special place in my heart because, if I'm not mistaken, when I first saw it, this is when I was hanging out with my stepbrother who we used to watch horror movies together and listen to metal, and he had a new girlfriend and group of friends that were into all this stuff as well, into metal and horror that lived in close by, or it's like 45 minutes away, right? As I've said before, to get to the nearest theater. So he's like, hey, you should come hang out with my girlfriend and her siblings and our friends, and hang out for the weekend or whatever, or at least go over there. And that was a big deal because it was legit. I was the kid brother, but had some legitimacy.
Yeah.
And it was spending, hanging out with cool people that liked what I liked, which wasn't always the case. And that's when I first saw this and was just like, oh man, like the motorcycle scene in the sewer and all of that stuff was just awesome. I kind of remembered The Blob, at the time as this older movie, as it is good or whatever, but all of the 80s parts that hit home in this movie were just amplified by the time period and when I saw it and everything. And like, this is a cool remake, in some ways cooler than the first one, especially at the time. Since I've gone back and forth because the original is a classic and it brings us this, but at the time that was in my thoughts. Wow, cool, cool people, cool dudes on motorcycles, leather jackets, the whole horror metal thing and anti-establishment. He's put upon in the small town. All that stuff worked even on a different level at the time, and I still think it holds up. I mean, there are some amazing practical effects in this.
Yeah.
Everybody's bringing everything they can to it. The kind of twist in the narrative is also, a sign of the times, which I want to get into later. I think there's a lot to this, and it's pretty great. One of the best remakes out there, definitely, hands down, horror classic in my opinion.
Thank you very much. There's so much that I want to get into there. Julia, so I take it this is the first time that you've watched the 1988 The Blob. I don't remember how well you remember. I don't know how well you remember the 1958 The Blob, but tell me your thoughts.
I mean, I kind of want to go back and listen to the review that we did before because I don't remember how I felt about the other one. I'm not a fan of this movie particularly. I get that it's really well, well done as far as the effects and everything go, and that it's probably a pretty good remake. But for me, it's just not. I watched it. I mean, I'm just not into the whole gross ew effects. And so I just kind of, I don't know, some parts of it I really liked. I like Shawnee Smith. I think she's great. Some parts I thought were really silly, like why she's the one who goes off to look for her brother instead of the whole, like, her and her dad, or just the dad or whatever. But I mean, it's just different things that kind of would bug me every once in a while. But the effects are effective. They're for sure it's horror. I mean, you watch that and it's terrifying. There's some great jump scares, like the sheriff, the sheriff popping up in the window.
Yes. Yeah.
of the phone booth. So I get why people like it. It's just not really my scene per se. But
Sure.
I do think there's a lot of really good things in it.
Thank you very much. All right, Drew, I think it was your idea for us to watch this film. Yeah, you may very well
Probably.
be the most influential person on the cast as far as like what we watch at any given time because
Oh God, I hope not.
because- but I'm pretty sure that you went, "Hey, let's do Blob," and we were all like, "Yeah." Oh,
I
that sounds
think
good.
because this is a good. We just did all the 80s. We just did the 80s Fly, and I think this is a good
Yeah.
chaser to that. I really love this movie. I remember seeing the trailers for it when I was a kid and being really scared of the trailers. And then when it came to the drive-in in my hometown, like we all jumped into the station wagon and went to see it, and it scared the bejesus out of me when I was a kid. So honestly, again, I think this might be blasphemous to some people, but when I think of the Blob, I actually think of this one first, and
Huh.
then the Steve McQueen 1950s version second, because like this one just looms a lot larger in my mind because there's like the nostalgic factor of like seeing it with my family. And again, it just really scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. It's strange though, as an adult, it's kind of a comfort food movie for me. Like it's a movie I'll watch when I don't feel very good. I love this. I like the small town feel. I like the ensemble cast of it. I like how they kind of flip the script on who's going to be the main character early on in the movie. I just think this has a lot going for it. Very likable cast, and as Tony pointed out, like terrific special effects, a lot of which still look really good and are really jarring still today. It is really gross, so I mean, if you're not into that sort of 80s, splattery, goopy, type of body horror, I don't think that this would be for you. For me, this hits a lot of sweet spot, right down to the hero's glorious mullet. So like I don't know, I love this movie, and I'm glad that we're finally talking about it.
I'm it's so funny there's a lot for me to react to there, and I should probably just avoid my own opening thoughts because we'll get into all of that. So let's start. First thing is where this fits into the because I'll get into gore, and that's fascinating, but I want to talk about where this fits into the history of horror because this is a remake of the 1958 The Blob. And by the way, my personal feeling about that one is I'm not there with I really love this movie, but to me the 1958 The Blob is this just it's part of my childhood. I think of that groovy Hernando's Hideaway theme song and Steve McQueen and it's so this does not supplant the 1950s one for me.
That's
But
fine.
yeah, but I find it fascinating that this movie is not that radical a change. It's very interesting that the changes to the 1958 one in this remake are relatively minor compared to, say, you think about what are the other major remakes around that period, right?
Well,
There's
there's The Thing and
the
The Fly,
Thing,
obviously.
the Thing, and The Fly. Both of those are pretty radical. This one, for instance, when you think about it, this movie takes place in a teeny tiny town, just like the 50s one. I mean, for me, in my mind, I'd completely forgotten that. So I sit down. I haven't seen it in like 30 years. And I figured, okay, 1980s, it'll take place in like a Spielbergian suburb, you know, like you would see all the time in like ET and stuff like that. But no, it's another tiny small town. And frankly, 1958, 1988, aside from the mullets, are not very far apart in terms of what a small
Yeah.
town looks
I mean,
like.
all the things that are there that are present in small town.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that struck me. It's an 80s small town. So
Yeah.
again,
What does that mean?
when I'm watching this, I feel like, hey, I get, I wasn't super counter, I wasn't a punk. I wasn't a troublemaker like this guy was.
Yeah.
But like, because he's got, looks like he's probably been in jail, possibly.
Right.
Well, they
But
say
the
he's
cops
been in
arrest
juvie.
him. Yeah, he's been
very
in
true.
juvie. And so like, I wasn't that, but that didn't mean that it wasn't a pain to have a mullet, quote unquote long hair and listen to metal. This guy's not particular, other than the leather jacket, may or may not be a metalhead in that same way.
Well-
But all that stuff, like it wasn't hard to get harassed by people, and certainly like the way that the jocks treat him and stuff like that. So there was an instant kind of, yeah, I get it, man, kind of idea, even though I was younger.
The thing about who this guy is, because I had a friend in high school that reminds me so much of this character, and he was a guy that he worked on cars and he worked on motorcycles, and he was from a lower income family, and you talk about like the metal thing, like these kind of guys, and I don't think they're uncommon in small towns. Like they're a rebel type, but they're just as likely to listen to be listening to AC/DC one moment and then like switch over to country. And
Yeah.
I
See
think
what was weird about that too is I wasn't that person either, because boy, did I not enjoy country and everything about that, because all the kickers were also after me. And in fact, I didn't listen to AC/DC for a long time for exactly that reason, because all the country hicks, and I say that because I've gotten chased down by them and threatened with bodily harm, also liked AC/DC.
Yeah.
And even though that was cool to like in the metal community, like I was more of a thrash person or whatever, but I lumped AC/DC in with all of that for exactly the reason that you're talking about. And that
I'm not being like I don't necessarily specifically mean AC/DC. Like I'm just saying that like this is a particular kind of guy, and like
you're totally right.
The fact that the guy has like we were talking about like his clothing on social media.
Well, I was mocking his shirt because I said,
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean you're on a roll. Go ahead. Yeah.
I associate that kind of shirt with Western wear, and like he's also got like these sort of Western lapels on his leather jacket, and his motorcycle boots have some cowboy boot-esque qualities to him. So there is a touch of a cowboy to this guy, and I think so when I think about like who this guy is in sort of a small town ecosystem, like that's who this guy is to me.
Right.
He's a gearhead. He's a redneck. He also might listen to metal. He probably does because he's got an ironic 80s mullet. But
to be honest, what I think this guy is a general purpose, and this is not a mockery, but he is exactly what Steve McQueen was, which is a general purpose, no particular reason rebel that
right.
that the less mature police officers distrust and harass, and that's all he is. He's whatever and this is not a complaint, because it's exactly what they were doing with McQueen in the first one. It's like whatever you want to project onto him as being the reason why you get picked on by losers like that deputy, that's what he is. He's got, and all these markers can mean whatever you really want them to mean, including his hair, because his hair is very MTV. There's nothing uncool about his hair. His hair is not dirty. His hair is clean and
well, all of his until he
blow-dried.
falls off his motorcycle, all his clothing is clean too.
Yeah, he looks. He's this guy. This guy looks very much like he could be coming off of TV. There's a shorthand here about how there are always two kinds of youth in movies like this, and maybe in our world, and they get reflected a little bit. There's the kind of youth that adults look at and approve of instantly, which is true of these jocks, one of whom is a straight up date rapist. And and then there's the kind of youth that authority figures, at least those who are most insecure, distrust on sight. And this guy's that one.
Well, and I just, that was always also frustrating too. Is all I wanted to do was hang out, go to movies, hang out with my friends, and then the town still trusts the date rapist guy.
Yeah,
who's straight up a date rapist, and that was always like, that's a for real thing. And it was always just like, what? I'm a devil worshiper because I play Dungeons and Dragons and listen to metal, and that guy's a date rapist. Like that guy right there, I can go to school with.
Yeah,
that guy, those his friends, they're bad people. Right?
Well, what's funny is they set this up at the beginning. I interrupted. I'm so sorry, Tony. I didn't mean to ride over you.
No, it's just I was pretty much finished. It was just that's the kind of thing that happens.
Yeah,
and it happens everywhere. But there's a certain, again, like the way I kind of felt about Trick or Treat. This also felt. I know it's exaggerated now, but when you're a teenager, it hits in a different way, I think.
Right. You internalize it.
I think the teenagers in this feel fairly authentic. Like the most exaggerated character to me is the date rapist guy. Like he sort of seems like he walked off the set of Grease.
Yeah, there's a little bit of goofy comedy to his
perhaps he's got a bar. He's got a bar in the back of his car. But like the other football player, to this movie's credit, other than having extraordinarily poor choices and friends, he doesn't seem like a terrible guy. Like he seems like he's gonna be he's moved the flag.
He's quick to judge our anti-hero, but also that guy is in juvie. Like if you're our intrepid football player, that guy is trouble in your town and causing havoc, right? Like there's no doubt about that. So I'm with you. And they don't loop him in the, and I hate to make the parallels, but this has all been in my mind for all these years. He's not the same guys who are the guys in Trick or Treat. He himself,
right? And
that's partially because he is more of a small town, hero guy. Like he does mean well with his crush, and he doesn't come off as a bad person, but it's easy to kind of think of him in that same mold because he does hang out with all these jocks who are jerks, right?
And I think also for guys like you, like we're going to immediately identify more with Flag than the captain of the football team. Before we move on from Flag, though, something that I keep thinking about, because this, Frank Darabont was a co-writer on this, and of course, he made several Stephen King adaptations. He's associated with King. Do you think, especially because of the way he's dressed and everything, do you think that the last name was curbed from Randall Flag?
Julia says yes.
Yeah, everything that to do with Stephen King. It's like tons of Stephen King stuff all throughout this. There's a lot of The Stand references, not the least of which, of course, is that Shawnee Smith was in The Stand, but just the whole thing of the government creating the risk that ends up being the big problem. So yes, that is an homage.
Although the
And
problem, go ahead. Sorry.
which
Well,
one is Paul? Is that the one you were just talking about, or is that
Paul's the decent football player
okay?
who, like, remember he asks out the girl
So
just before he
he and
loses
Shawnee Smith,
consciousness,
the
and
guy who played
yeah.
Paul, and the girl who plays Meg, Shawnee Smith, actually went to prom together
Aw.
in real
Well,
life,
that's
but like way
cute.
before this.
And he's the one
Yeah,
who gets eaten and his arm comes off. I
yeah.
yeah.
I-
That
Yeah.
was so gross.
Yeah,
Oh
I
my
gotta
god,
say,
but really effective.
I'm not a gore hound. Like, I know that people are like, oh, check out this like buzzsaw sequence that, and they'll put it on Twitter, and their teeth flying around and stuff. And I don't like that stuff typically. However, this movie I give a complete pass to. I love all the crazy effects in this. None of it does not freak me out. It doesn't hurt my
See,
feelings.
this
This one I'm
this
down with.
this freaks me out way more than seeing somebody hack the pieces with a chainsaw or something. Well, it's just like the idea that you're being eaten alive, like to take
No, it's horrific.
yeah,
It,
and
It's
the way
horrific. It's like
it
the
is indeed. Yes,
well,
it's awful.
it's like all the Toxic Avenger and like RoboCop, all the stuff with the chemicals where it's just consuming you, like you say, alive. It's got to be terribly painful. But what I love about when that scene that you're talking about with the hand is that he actually is underneath the blob, like the actor is,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
she didn't expect that to be the case, so she was like really
Huh.
scared. It was, like,
Yeah, there's
screaming.
really great commentary about the effects, and the Scream Factory Shout Factory disc is
Mm.
really
oh, that
an embarrassment
fucker's
of
loaded.
riches as far as all of that. But yeah, I mean, and it's crazy too because they talk a lot about how almost every effect has to be a new way to plan that effect.
Mm.
Every scene they were doing something a little different, and the setups on that it wasn't just like, oh, just well, we got the blob down, it's just the blob, like we do this and then it makes the blob, even
How
though
does the
that's
blob work? So talk to me a little bit about. We might come back to the characters, but talk to me a little bit about the blob as a technical effect. Like, what
well,
is it?
well,
Like,
there's different. Well, that's what I'm saying. They had to do different things each time, or not. I mean, not all. It's not universally different, but the biggest thing, like in that scene especially, is they got this material that they filled full of this jelly substance. I can't remember the name of it. Right? It's used in a lot of stuff, but they basically mixed up this thing, so it's super heavy. So
Mhm.
they describe like he's basically kind of almost being waterboarded in a way, like when that's on top
Goodness.
of it. It's hard to breathe. It's sitting. And so they made basically this airbrushed sack that they then filled full of stuff, and they would do sometimes reverse gags or like pull it up, and then they had miniatures. Like the
Yeah.
phone booth is a miniature with a doll
Really?
version of the the actress.
Yeah, they tried to do the full size, but it just never looked right.
Wow.
With
And
like a
then
doll. Yeah.
some of it's has more animatronic, like all the tentacles and stuff. And he said
Yeah.
they tried like some really early CG and just didn't.
Well, at
It's
the end of
great.
the
Like I
film,
said, the interviews and the commentary are just, if you want to know more, I mean, that's the way to go. Buy the disc and
yeah,
take the ride, because it's great too, because a lot of the director's commentary is also kind of what we talked about. We're like, it's like, hey, I saw this movie, and then I had this great mentor who turned me on to these movies, and I watched this, and then I worked with Corman, and then I did, and so it's this love of cinema
Mm.
that goes beyond just it's not just a, hey, I made a really gory movie, but hey, I'm this director and here's how I came up in the world, and here's what I did and how I did my time and who I talked to, and actually the effects guys in it do the same thing. Like, I started out doing this, and then I came here, and then so it's also partially a filmmaker's dream, like, that's really interesting, and the respect for cinema. And they admit, like, hey, the blob was cool, I guess, a classic, but we were trying to do something interesting and different, and I mean, Darabont's on the script too, so that's really I mean, he's solid. It's one of my
Apparently,
faves, so
it
it's really interesting. But to your point though, there's a lot of different things that they do for each setup. But in general, it's an airbrushed sack, basically.
Well, and one of the, I don't know if that's what you're thinking of, Tony, but one of the effects is something called methocell or something like that.
Yeah, that's the
methyl
thicken,
cellulose.
yes.
yeah, which is the thickening ingredient for
It's a
milkshakes.
big gloppy.
Yeah.
It's a big gloppy semi-liquid that flows around, and you can
Yeah.
store stuff in it. And apparently sometimes what you're looking at is a giant sort of, if you picture like a weight blanket, basically, like a sack that's
Exactly.
then filled with this gunk, and then you can throw, and as Tony points, it's colored, then you can throw it around. But like at the end, the Reverend has a jar with a little tiny bit of the blob in it. Is that animated? I'm trying
Oh,
to
there,
figure
It's
out.
yeah,
a
and there's
it's
a
a
hand.
it's
It's a
a
fake hand.
yeah.
Got it.
It's
That's
cool.
cool.
Like, I mean, there's a lot of innovation in this.
Mm.
There's also in one of the specials, it talks about the crystallized blob and
Yeah.
how that worked, and that was also fascinating because it could have been different. But again, it's a master class on, well, you do the thing and you hope this works, and
And
you're
why
like a lot
not
of
use liquid nitrogen on this thing?
What do you mean?
Well, if it freezes with with the what do you call the stuff that the retardant, fire retardant, if it freezes with that into that crystal, it seems like if you use liquid nitrogen, you could really like.
I think maybe they just didn't. I mean, you wouldn't have
In the
enough in a small
in the
You
town.
would have it
story,
handy,
they've
but
got a big. Don't they have like a giant? That's the whole point. Is that they've got a giant like gas truck full of liquid nitrogen at the end
Yeah,
oh, they
yeah,
do.
yeah.
that they
But in
pour all
general,
over.
just like they don't have it in the same way that it gets brought in
Well, because he talks
in the
about how we're
original.
gonna like go stick it in like a freezer or something, and I was like, don't you just want to stick it in a vat of liquid
Well, there
nitrogen?
isn't any such thing. I mean, you've got it. And what they did in the original movie, by the way, is that they put it in a refrigerated truck or whatever, and then they attach a parachute to it and they drop it onto the into the Arctic,
That would
which
be
which
as good as you could do, I guess.
which I thought, well, yeah, until 2022, and most of it's melting, so the blob will be back basically.
No, I
But
know, yeah.
but
Honestly, like I think that the military keeps trying to attack it with like fire and bullets
yeah.
and things like
And
that.
bullets, which is hilarious. Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. So I started out by saying that this movie is curiously beholden to the original because it's in a small town, kind of, it's not a suburb. It's a King-esque, and 1950s-esque small town. But what is very 80s is this concept of a really freaking malevolent government,
Right.
Well,
of
I think unlike first of all, like before I lose this train of thought, this is sort of my ideal type of remake. That
okay.
it's respectful to the original, but it also
Mhm.
forges its own path to a
Right.
certain point. But as far as like the politics of this movie, like I think that's something that the original really and movies more in general, like you didn't have movies that could make like overt political statements so much back in the 50s. Like it just wasn't done so much.
Yeah.
Whereas like by the 80s, you're more freed to do that. So you can and of course by then we're in the Reagan greed is good 80s, so like it sort of makes sense to have this malevolent government with a friendly face. Like I think the way the character of Dr. Meadows is done, like it is very indicative of the Reagan
Yeah.
the sort of Reagan persona, where he's this friendly guy doing terrible things, and like the behind the closed doors he's like all these people are expendable, and
Mhm.
but at first he presents as this very nice old man, and the actor really sells it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's the classic. By the time we're reaching 88, we're fully into don't trust anybody. Like look at all these wars, look at all this stuff, look at, and that kind of nihilism as well.
I love that there was a rumor that that there were different closing credits that talked about let me see if I can find it. That it said that supposedly this is the original closing credits. The Blob contains a purely fictional account of a group of ruthless and corrupt military agents. These characters do not represent the United States government, and it would be erroneous and unfair to suggest they do. The vast majority of North American armed forces personnel have demonstrated the utmost moral sense, regard for civilian welfare, and worthiness of the public trust.
So evidently there
I
was
know.
a draft of that. Like
Yep.
it didn't end up yeah, because that's brought up actually in the commentary close to the end of
Goodness gracious.
yeah, the studio that was there somewhere there's a draft
So
of the
that
credits with that.
Well, that gives you an
stuff.
idea of where you are in 1988, because it's fascinating. Because, in the 1950s, we have talked many times about how films of the 50s, you have this notion that Sometimes the government lies, and sometimes the government sacrifices the innocent, and it's usually for good reason, and the rest of us are going to back them up. Post Watergate and post Vietnam, you have a lot of cynicism and distrust of the government, and Vietnam ends in 1975, and now it's 1988. So now you are 8 years into the Reagan era, and so everybody is kind of straddling those two worlds. The distrust of the government that still hangs over from the debacle, from the sort of poor performance at the end of Vietnam and the Watergate era, but the Morning in America stuff of Reagan means that you'll make a movie where the government sicks a giant blob on people, and you'll also draft a document to go in the credits that says, but Reagan tells us to trust the government.
Not all,
And
not all
that's
military,
fascinating to me. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
This is
Hashtag not all military.
This is post Iran Contra kind of stuff as well. So you have
Yes,
like, actively
well said.
like, oops, yeah, okay, so we did lie, and then we're still getting documentaries about what all was going on and the war on drugs and stuff like that. So
Oh goodness
you know,
gracious.
Well, and
Yeah.
see, and that whole thing with Dr. Meadows, it's just that was just so far fetched to me because I mean I get it, what the point is, but the fact that he would just be like they're expendable, like not even, especially when they're trying to
I
get
don't
out and the
know
blob's
though.
nowhere,
nah,
blob's like
Yeah.
nowhere to be seen.
nope.
I
Ugh.
mean,
think
think about like
totally-
the Tuskegee experiments and
Yeah.
stuff like
Well,
that.
I
I
was
don't.
very mad at him the whole time. I was like, yo,
Well,
I
he's
did
a
I did enjoy
despicable
that.
character. But like, I don't think he's entirely far fetched, particularly the sort of scientist he actually is, because
Right.
he initially presents himself as sort of a
CDC kind of guy, right?
Yeah. But he's actually somebody that's involved with biological warfare.
Yeah.
And, so he's probably sit back and thinking, going, oh, well, let's see what this thing that we've created, let's see how well it works in a combat situation.
Well,
that's
yeah,
the thing
and
is
I
he-
just didn't like it. I didn't like this particular brand of mad scientist. It just was really, I didn't even like, I don't know. It just made me feel really uncomfortable in a way that's not interesting to me. It was more like, just like, why are you like this? This doesn't make any sense. It's silly. I don't know. It's just for that particular.
I
that
don't know.
particular
Like, I
choice
think as
bothered
far as
me.
like mad scientists go, I think that this guy's pretty close to a lot of quote unquote mad scientists we've had in real life. If you look at the history of military experimentation.
Well,
Mhm.
maybe that's why I didn't like it. It's because I was maybe it
Yeah,
was
I mean,
too
it's
close
too.
to
It's
home.
it's.
I
I mean,
don't know.
it's exaggerated, but it's. I think it struck a chord. This is again why
Yeah.
horror works. Struck a
Yeah.
chord because and his whole thing is he didn't. These aren't people who set out to make a blob. They set
Right.
out to make a biological weapon, and the fact that it's going to grow and turn into this thing is a bonus. Like,
Yeah.
wow, we
Well,
did
yeah,
not
I
expect
mean-
this
Wow.
thing to be this.
Like,
Like
they're thinking next stop Moscow.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. And in fact, the funny thing is, all you've done at the end is shown people how you fix it. Like you freeze it, and then your blob is mobile. You can
Of
just,
course, it
like,
does also make it a terrible weapon for Eastern Europe.
yeah. I mean, it's just exactly because somebody could freeze it and capture a little piece of it in a jar, like the Reverend here. And yes, that's funny. That whole concept of anti-government paranoid conspiracy is, by this point in 1988, super hip, to the point that like 6 years later than that, in the era of the X-Files, it has twisted all the way around to a level of kind of comfy familiarity. How we just live and swim in the waters of deep government conspiracy.
Well-
and that's where we were in the 90s, actually.
But it's not just that. So this is after, if I'm not mistaken, this is after Red Dawn,
Yes.
which is well, the government didn't save us,
Right.
So
you gotta do it
it's up to us
yourself, right?
scrappy kids who have to take
Well,
care of
how
things
come-
and take things in our own hands.
I mean, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful example. And it also makes me feel like I think this movie's pretty well constructed, but I do feel like there are a couple things that I'm kind of missing that would be neat. I don't get enough of a feel of what this small town actually is like. And I don't
Well,
get.
it's a ski town.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And there is that, the hope for snow. So as I think of it, there's the people gathering together and working to deal with the the snowmaker truck and stuff. But I mean, like in the original, one of the things I remember being charmed about the original is that as McQueen and the girl that he's not really with, he just kind of hooks up with her that evening to run around deal with the blob, just like here. You get a tour of the town and you kind of get a feel for how this tiny town works. And here, I kind of feel like the movie's in overdrive so much that you don't really get a feel for this world.
I think the difference here to me is, again, maybe it is just because of the town I lived in and the towns around it. There's a certain shorthand. I never thought of it as needing more because there's a shorthand to it of like, hey, this is football Friday night lights town, and there you go. But
I'm with Tony on this one.
It told me everything. Now, what you're talking about though is we're trading some of that establishment stuff for, basically more actiony bits and the military part.
Yeah.
Because
that's an extra 20-30 minutes,
a lot of
right?
that trade-off. The stuff that you're missing has been replaced more or less with, hey, the military's doing bad things and they're, when they're rounding people up, they're not really helping.
Right.
And all of that business. Along with the actiony bits and the chase to the sewers and all of that stuff, right? So you're trading that, but to me, I knew where I lived, and I had a good idea of that. Although we didn't have diner like this has. So.
Well, do you feel like, and by the way, you mentioned the sewers, and it has one of the best deaths. I want to go ahead. It sounds crass, but I want to talk about the best like blob eating people effects in this movie, but. Do you feel like if this movie were made, it's now 30 years hence, right? This movie was 30 years after the original. We're now like 30 years or whatever it is past that. Would it still be a small town? Like, what would it be today? If you were to remake the Blob today,
I'm
do you move it?
surprised that we haven't seen another version.
I thought there was one in the works. But
there was some talk of a Rob Zombie Blob, actually. And I think we know what that would have ended up like. But I don't know, because I think because of stuff like It and Stranger Things, I think the small town setting has kind of come back around. So maybe they still would have done that, or maybe they would have tried to do the Blob in the city. I think the problem you run in by putting the Blob in a more populated area is it almost makes it more difficult to defeat, because by the way the Blob works is like the more population you have to eat, like the more powerful it's going to be.
That's true. Yeah.
So like if it's in a small town, you can conceivably have a happy ending where the Blob is defeated. A little bit more difficult to do in suburbia or in a more urban environment.
It would be interesting now if you wanted to twist it even slightly, is you could do suburbia on the edge of it. Like you could do it if it was in Round Rock or Georgetown here, for example. Right. And then it's moving towards the city or moves into the city. Then you've got a lot of different dynamics that you can cover. But I don't know. It's hard to top this one. I'm sure you could. I mean, there's always
maybe it's not necessary. I mean, maybe it would be completely not worth.
I think some of the charm would be lost, because by now we would get like a completely CG Blob, I'm sure, and like some of the like the original has charming effects for its time, and this one has. They're gross, but they're very effective. And I think if you did like a fully CG Blob, I think some of it would. I don't know. I just don't think it would be as fun, I guess. But I could be wrong. Like I would, if they made another version of the Blob, I probably would go see it.
I'd go see it. I mean, remember the remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the one called Body Snatchers that was, I guess, in the 90s.
Oh yeah.
What that one. The equivalent of a small town that they did was a military base. It's actually pretty brilliant, because it actually works as in a sense, a small town, because you have housing, you have all the, so that was cool. I agree with you. Boy, if somebody gave you that assignment, there are so many choices that you have to make. And
I do think you kind of have to. The reason, and this is one of the reasons why they are somewhat beholden to the structure of the original, is the idea that you have a guy that's kind of on the outside of the town
Yeah.
becoming the savior of the town.
Yeah.
And that's gonna, you know, resonate. And you know, you see this guy has a heart after all. You know, he's not just, because like the whole thing is like you know, throughout the thing there's lots of dialogue like, oh, do you just care about yourself? Do you just care about yourself? And you know, obviously, but you look at his actions, and that's not true. Like he's very tender with the older guy. You know, he's just a little rough around the edges, but I think that is something that would probably have to carry over into whatever you did. Like,
Well, it's funny. There's a thing that somebody was commenting on how Chris Claremont wrote Wolverine, that there's a style of the 80s that you don't see as much anymore, which is the sort of hard ass with a heart of gold
yeah,
concept of masculinity, you know, tough guy who ultimately is fairly sweet, you know. And you
well,
kind
I think
of
that's also a lot of Marvel Comics characters, because like the Thing is from the Fantastic
Right.
Four is rather that way too. And you know, it's funny you mentioned Wolverine. Like this, you know, the character Flag does have a certain Wolverine swagger to him, like the way he
Right.
kind of stomps around the town and everything.
Yes. Yeah.
I
like all that.
I wonder why, you know, and maybe I just don't see enough action movies these days, but why that's kind of, you know, not done very much anymore.
Well, I think it's sort of old hat. We're in a different universe now. I think everybody's expected to kind of have more layers than that. The way that worked, there were assumptions that if you were a manly man, you didn't have layers. You know, you weren't likely to like secretly take good care of puppies, and so when you did, it was super charming. I think now people are expected to have a little bit more nuance than that, and so it doesn't have the ironic effect that it once did, which is too bad because it was kind of a cool thing. Sometimes you'll still see it and you realize I'm responding to this, but this is all like very dated. You know, this is an old concept of masculinity left over from John Wayne, frankly. So yes, I want to talk about and you know, gosh, it's occurring to me. This is something that they often grapple with our friends at the Monster Movie Happy Hour. We haven't done a synopsis of this movie, and I don't think we're going to at this point. But if you've been listening, hopefully you've seen the movie and you know it's a small town.
I
Blob has
do
landed.
not
It's created by the
understand
military.
why I do not understand why anybody would listen to a podcast about a movie that they had not seen.
Right.
Like that's like I
would totally
don't
do
know.
that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it
I
happens
know.
a decent amount.
Hopefully, if you're listening to this, we've given you a lot of spoilers. Hopefully, you can kind of glean what the plot of the movie is. But
Spoiler: it's a big blob takes over the town.
it's
Yeah.
a blob. I want to talk about the best killing effects, which maybe is uncool
poor
of me
kid.
and
Oh my God.
crass. But okay,
You know,
go
though,
ahead.
you bring that up, Julia. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why this movie terrified me so much as a kid, because like this movie starts out by killing the apparent hero, and then it also kills a kid halfway through, which kids are normally safe in these kind of movies, but
no, that is super horrifying.
it really feels like anybody could die though. And
that's kind of the point. Is it's this thing that, you know, nature in this way, and this is a forced nature. You know, we've monkeyed with something we shouldn't, right? Doesn't care.
Right.
It doesn't care. This is why this creature is effective. It doesn't.
It's like COVID.
It does. Yeah. It doesn't think you can't outsmart it in the way that you could trick a person or even a creature or a demon or what, you know, where people go, oh, look over there, or anything like that. It exists in the same way that viruses, fungus, you know, anything that just they're you know, as we've proven, there's some sentience to single cell organisms or some organization that we are only still, you know, discovering, and how it all works together. But in general, this creature doesn't care about anything other than being more creature.
Yeah.
There's a level of sentience, but the sentience is to get it to be more creature by eating more things.
Yeah.
And that's scary. You can't reason with it. You can't trick it. You can only go so fast to get away from it. And if you ignore it, it's only going to get worse. right? It's not going to give up and go, man, I'm hungry. I should
Like
probably
housework.
eat something. Eventually a Leatherface has to eat, or
Yeah,
people aren't dreaming if there's a Freddy Krueger, right?
right.
But this thing is just going to go in any way possible. And
It's pretty remarkable.
that's scary.
Yeah, no, that is really well said. It reminds me of Richard Dreyfuss talking about Jaws, right? All it does is swim and eat and make
Yeah.
baby sharks, and that's all.
Yeah. That's what's terrifying.
Yeah, it's
So
go
best
ahead.
blob kills.
Okay. First of all, in general, what I love is the general principle that they've set up where, because the blob is more or less translucent, you can always see the people inside of it with their faces slowly melting apart. I mean, like blood
Yeah.
coming through the skin, eyes melting. So,
It's so horrible.
I found truly fascinating, though, the one where the woman is the woman is seemingly passed out drunk in the car, and then it turns out the blob has hollowed her out from underneath.
Oh, I know. Well, and that's when the rapey guy, is like all trying to feel her up, and
Right.
then that was actually the only kill in the whole movie where you're like, yeah,
Go blob.
it serves you right for
Because it's
feeling up
all
that
gross.
much
Like
woman.
he's such a gross
Oh,
character
he's
too. Because he's got a bar in his
Well, that one
a
and
bar,
also
not
the
just a
Dr.
bar, but a bar
Meadows.
full of like class rings on gold
Oh,
chain. Like every bit of it's just like, oh, you're so
He's nasty, and also
ugh.
Dr. Meadows getting, of course, killed.
Right.
You're all happy about that.
yes.
Right.
But
I-
the one, the soldier is actually a stuntman it's a triple amputee who's lost his legs and an arm and an eye, and so it's like they actually use the real. Speaking of practical effects, they
Yes.
actually use somebody who already was missing limbs to enhance that effect, which is very effective, of course.
Just remarkable.
I really love the guy getting pulled into the sink because I feel
I
like
did
that
not
is
like that one at all. Not at all.
I feel
That's
like
one of the
that
best
is such a
setups, too.
relatable
Hate.
thing though, because like who doesn't hate having to
Relatable.
put their but who doesn't hate
Oh,
having
yeah,
to
yeah,
put
yeah, 'cause
their
the
hand
disposal.
down the sink? It
Yeah,
always
yeah,
makes
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
It's always in
Yes.
the back of your mind that the disposal might turn on accidentally or something.
Right.
So I think it plays into like an everyday
I feel
fear very well.
Well, that's very expertly done because he puts his hand in the thing, and you're like, ah, and then he pulls his hand back out. That's such a great payoff. And then it just goes whoop and like grabs his face. Oh my goodness, that is amazing. By the way, that I have to say, when that happened, the guy gets pulled into the pipes. I was like, this is Stephen King. That's the
Yeah.
what was it called? The Raft. Where
There's
Oh
where
yeah, the in the sewer where it's moving too, it feels like the raft.
yes. Oh,
Well,
so
the
by the
raft
way, I
is
think
certainly an homage to the blob. I think
For sure.
that's safe to say.
Well,
For
no,
sure.
yeah.
Also interesting is, our deputy is Paul McCrane, who gets melted in RoboCop.
yes.
That guy.
Oh my goodness.
Emil
He
gets,
has all the luck.
he's got
I only ever think of him as the guy from ER who has the helicopter that keeps coming after him.
Yes.
He's got he has two different helicopter accidents.
That was really funny. That's totally true. Yeah, it literally comes back for him. That is that was so wild. Yeah, in this one, he has a very interesting death because he's facing towards the window or whatever it is. And the blob grabs him and pulls him such that he bends over backwards and goes through the window. It's a neat effect. It's we've seen it in other movies, and I can't remember the most recent one, but we did see that effect in another film recently where somebody gets pulled through a window in that way.
well,
It wouldn't have been
It's whatever movie it is where they're watching across the street. It was Jason. It was the spoof one. The woman across the street from the whatever in the window. That whole thing. from Netflix.
What?
You know the girl in the window.
No, I know what you're talking about,
my
but
God.
somebody got pulled backwards through a.
Well, I thought that's what you were thinking of, because doesn't she get pulled through?
I
Oh
don't think so.
not that. No, I'm sorry. No, it's a giant. It's a horror movie with a giant, and he pulls the girl, like the naked girl, through the window of the bathroom. What
Yes,
was that we were
that
watching?
was it was the werewolf movie. Where they're in the woods.
Yeah, that's what it was.
That
But
was
I
it.
can't remember what the movie was
Yeah,
called.
very
But
good.
yeah,
Excellent memory.
I knew I
of-
could see the girl in the bathroom in the window, and I was thinking it was. But no, of
Yeah.
course it's not, because it's a horror. It's
Excellent memory for gore scenes
Well,
in
except
a
that I
horror
forgot the
movie,
name of
Julia.
it.
That was
I forgot the name of it though.
very good. Yeah, it was called Sasquatch or something. I can't remember. I feel bad now. Yeah, I love the one where it pulls the kid under the water. As you guys mentioned, the kid, then he comes back out and he's like screaming, and he's being sort of surfed along the water.
Awful,
Uh,
awful. Hate it.
Yeah, still very effective.
It's a good effect though.
It's a great
Yeah.
effect. This is the thing. I don't dig gore. I'm not one of those guys. I'm not a Chrome Skull fan. None of that.
I like gore, and I think this movie is an excellent gore movie.
It's amazing. I mean, like, if I think of like the Toxic Avenger, I find it tiresome, right? But this really, I appreciate the effects here.
I kind of go back and forth, because I think once I reached a point where, like, I'd seen Toxic Avenger, I've seen Tetsuo the Iron Man, I've seen a bunch of things, and there came a point where, not that I'm inured to it, but just there's a certain kind of dare quality to things, to some movies,
Right. Yeah.
where it's more like, I'm shocking you, right? And you're like, man, I mean, I guess I get you. But
Yeah.
I'm not really shocked right now.
Yeah.
And it feels like the Would You Rather game from junior high.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Slide down a razor blade, or it's assault, or like all just the stuff where you're like, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I think it's not really as effective to me. But if it works for somebody, cool in the game.
Dude,
Right?
I am a Friday the 13th fan. Give me machetes to the face, and
Sure. And I like all that too.
Like, it's juvenile. I'm not saying it's not. But like, it makes my lizard brain happy. Like I also,
but there's a difference, Drew. Like, I think, like, there's some movies where it's like part of it and you're like, oh man, that is a shocking, well done gag.
Yeah.
And there are other movies where the point is, am I scaring you yet? Am I creeping you out yet? And almost universally to those films, I'm like, no, not really. I mean, I guess that's gross.
Most movies with gore effects, I am never afraid of the gore, because like, I read Fangoria growing up.
Exactly.
I know how it's done. Like,
Sure.
To me, it's more like, I like seeing, the sort of in your face of it, and I also like, to see a well played magic trick.
Sure.
I don't like, like, I don't watch stuff like Hostel or whatever.
That's
like,
the thing. I am very afraid of that stuff. I don't like people begging for their lives and all that stuff.
It doesn't make me feel fear. Like, this movie, I mean, not anymore, because I've now seen it so many times, but this movie for a long time really did scare me. And like, because the visceralness, like, there's the line actually by Bill Moseley is one of the soldiers, but where he says they were still screaming while they were inside of it, like that kind of thing. Like,
it's right.
It's a creepy idea.
I'm with you.
It's a creepy idea.
Yeah.
It's as I've said, like serial killer movies, that kind of thing. Like, I don't know why, but they don't normally affect me the way something like this, where I know, like, you're really out of your depth. Like, you can't reason with the blob. The blob just wants to eat you.
Well, I mean, I think in serial killer movies, it really depends on, actually in all of these, there are a million little choices that you can make that will determine how we as the audience react. And some movies are clearly just there for a good time. And if you are intent on, like, over empathizing in your head with the victims, that is you making that choice, because that's not what the movie is attempting to be. And other movies truly are, like something like Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. It's intended to make you depressed. That's the point of that piece of art. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here, I know it's scary. There's still screaming inside the blob, but I think there's more of just I mean, to me, this is an amazement. This is a bunch of magic tricks that amaze me, and I'm just kind of
But
impressed by it.
here's part of the other magic of that. When Drew's talking about that, you don't see. I mean, you see our football hero screaming, but when it's told to you in the part where it really hits you,
Yeah.
we don't see that. Like we're being told that, and it's just as creepy again.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good
And
point.
horrible. And you're picturing in your head going, "Oh, that is awful."
Yeah.
Well, and that soldier,
Exactly.
Bill Moseley really sells it. Like he
Mhm.
seems truly
That's what I'm saying.
traumatized.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he didn't sign up for that. He signed up to contain a biowarfare thing,
Right.
not get eaten by a horrible amoeba thing. I like that they made Alamo Drafthouse PSA out of it. I still like the film, the theater
Yes.
scene, like
Right, where it drops out of the ceiling and grabs the guy. That's true goofiness on the part
Well,
of
it's
the
not
filmmakers, and
just
it's
that.
funny.
He's ruined the
Yeah.
movie, and they're there, and they're not supposed to be there, which is also something I can relate to, trying to sneak into movies.
Yeah.
In fact, that's I have a whole Deadly Spawn story about why I'm not as enamored with Deadly Spawn, because of a bait and switch at a small town movie theater. But
Huh.
but all that stuff. But also when it starts to cut and like there's the lights flashing and they're trying to escape and the chaos of it all, that buildup is fantastic, and just all of that stuff just works. And that's a great scene. And again, I just love that they also were able to cut together a PSA out of it. Like don't talk, don't
I wonder if you can
text, or
find
else-
that one on YouTube. Do you
Oh
think?
yeah, I'm pretty sure that one's up there actually.
That'd be really great. I wanted to mention, talking about the cast, by the way, we talked about Kevin Dillon as the rebel with a heart of gold. Shawnee Smith is wonderful and always, she has a very sweet look, and she was also really great in Summer School. I just want to mention this because she's the pregnant girl, and if you recall in that one, she's in summer school. She had a bad time. She's in summer school because she failed because she was, I don't know, she was distracted with being super pregnant. Now she's super duper pregnant and in summer school, and the jock winds up going to the Lamaze classes with her and stuff. It's a really neat storyline, and it took me forever to remember that's where I knew this actress from.
Out in the stand.
But I don't remember her in The Stand. Who did she play?
I don't know. I just know she's in the stand.
Okay, well, I got.
She was the sort of half crazy woman that I can't remember the character's name.
Yeah. Totally. I know. I do. I can't. I don't remember the character's name either, but I totally remember.
Oh, the dangerous one.
I can totally see her
Okay,
being
I do kind of remember her. All right, yes, because the lesson of The Stand, one of the interesting ones, is that if you're bad, you go be a gangster in Vegas. But basically, there ain't no time for cut ups and people who are
Julie Laurie.
out of control. In the Stand universe, we don't have time for people who act the fool. And so, yeah. Gosh. Okay. Briefly, the fashions. I made a comment on Twitter, so we got to bring it up, or people are going to feel like it was a bait and switch. I was just pointing out that the wonderful shirt that Kevin Dillon wears in this movie, that he wears underneath his leather jacket, is a double-breasted, I believe, Chess King shirt. And I have not seen a double-breasted long sleeve shirt in 30 years. Nobody's, maybe I have not seen anybody like walk into work or walk around in the mall wearing a double-breasted shirt. And it seems to be a fashion that just is as dead as medallions for men. So
Jason is so sad about that.
I know, because they were awesome. They were great. I called it a 1988 New Jack Swing Chess King special. And
the only difference is if that was truly in fashion, I have to look at what year that would have been in fashion.
Yeah,
the only thing I
that's
do
accurate.
know about it's truly small town. In fact, this town is it's a ski town, but it's actually filmed in Louisiana. Is you can guarantee that a small, especially in the South, because I know this for a fact, is about maybe a year behind the trends.
Sometimes more,
and tends to hold on to those things because they come through. So it's like that whole fashion trickle down where you have a friend who maybe lives in a bigger city, and then you go there and you get some stuff, and then it finally gets popular.
Yeah.
But then that starts to trickle into actual like stores that you can get access to
Sure. Yeah.
regularly.
Well
And
said.
because the remainders and all of that. And so you tend to live in that era. Now things are accelerated because you can just get on the internet and like you can buy things, right?
Right.
So I'm interested. I think things tend to go a little bit faster than they used to, but definitely in the 80s.
But
This, I'm curious
seems
if
pretty
he's
on trend to
in
me.
the time, like right in the time, or if he's behind the times, or if they even thought about that. But I find that fascinating.
It reminds me of stuff like like Albie Schur and Terrence Trent D'Arby and a lot of those New Jack Swing guys around '88. It feels like an on trend shirt to me. It feels
Sure.
like the kind of thing that Jason, would have been buying at Redbird Mall at Chess King in the '80s.
See, again, like I see this shirt and I see like guys getting ready to go to the rodeo. Like
Really?
I agree somewhat, but I also think there's the other one which I had because again, I'm this is my lens, specifically my I wanted to wear more metal shirts and stuff like that because I was just getting this is 88 metal's still fairly new to me where I live. I'm getting into thrash and stuff like that. But my stepbrother, who's kind of, hey, come along, hang out, also was kind of ladies' man at in that area because he was cool. He was cooler in a lot of ways. In some ways not. I was, and also a troublemaker to be honest.
Yeah.
But like he also was like, look, you gotta have some clothes that aren't that because you're never gonna be popular in this town with you're not gonna get dates unless you have some cool clothes. And
unless
boy,
you
did
have
I
at
not
least
have a
one
lot of cool
double-breasted
clothes.
shirt.
So, but the idea is you have the leather jacket. You can take off the leather jacket. You still look sort of legit, even though he's got the boots and everything. You know what I mean? Like, there's the idea that you can sort of blend in more than if you were wearing a Slayer shirt, for example.
And
Like,
and
that's a different character.
You may be right, and I honestly but honestly, like my point is is that I see this shirt and I don't think of it as something that looked out of place in a small. In fact, I never thought about that until Jason made that post because, like,
Yeah,
no,
I knew a lot of guys that had shirts like that. And it wasn't a shirt you would just wear around, mind you. It was like something that would be for a particular kind of activity. But the fact of the matter is, though, is we're probably overanalyzing this guy's wardrobe more than the wardrobe department.
I really just wanted to homage for a second to this.
Well,
awesome,
I think it's
shirt.
interesting that we each have our own version of what this is. That's I think that's part of the magic of film. And yeah, we may be overanalyzing it, but again, I also saw it as cool guy who, he's a delinquent, so he doesn't really fit in with the town.
Yeah.
But if he wanted to, he could fit in. And that's kind of, it's that, I had the side of my head shaved for a long time, but I kind of also kept it that way because I could put that under a hat.
Sure.
Or I could comb my hair over that part and sort of look more legit because you still had to. You had to sometimes attempt to not get beat up or called out or whatever. So but it's funny that, I think I totally get what Drew's saying though. And yeah, maybe we're overanalyzing, but I just think it's
fun though.
It's kind of interesting in that small town way.
My reaction is that, thinking of him kind of having the slight cowboy vibe under all the rocker vibes is going back to this, like, well, he underneath it all, he's actually the hero. And who are the heroes in Western movies? Cowboys. So
that's a nice bit of analysis. It is, and I'm not mocking it. I'm just saying.
I also seriously doubt that was a conscious decision on maybe it was, I don't know, but like I would be surprised if it was I think that with as far as the actual wardrobe department, though, I was like, oh, does he look cool? Yes, he looks cool. We're done.
Exactly. Yeah. By the way, I've seen another interesting instance of that fashion hole that you can fall into where Julia and I were on our honeymoon actually in the Poconos, which which is like literally there's just a whole world that I've just
Stereotype.
opened up to you by saying that we were on a
Stereotype
honeymoon
of the
in the
yeah.
Poconos. Nevertheless, we were at a Caesars resort in the Poconos, and this was what 1994, and the band, the guy singing on stage, you kind of got the impression he never really left this valley because he was wearing a bolero jacket that I swear to God was like 10 years out of date. Like it was the kind of thing that you would have worn, in the mid 80s. And that was wonderful and hilarious to me. He was like, you know what? This bolero jacket works for me. And I'm gonna just keep wearing it forever. That was
People who
You know,
come to the Poconos for the honeymoons have no taste anyway.
well, I mean, it was it was a time. That was the tail end of the whole universe of the Caesars resort.
Heart shaped hot tubs.
Yeah.
by the way, our intrepid hero flag also would fit into an AHA video.
Yes.
He's definitely in there with Take On Me, like
Yeah,
4 years
yeah.
earlier than this, but it
No, for real.
fits like
Yeah.
it tracks.
Okay, we should get our final thoughts on the Blob 1988. Man, makes me want to go back and watch the other one as well, though.
Also, I love by the way, I gotta also mention, I love the motorcycle stunt of him using his heroic daring do, which fails at the beginning and now
Yes.
has to work, right?
Well, they did a good job with
all
like
in,
setting
and
stuff
so-
up and paying it off, right?
So he has to drive his motorcycle, his heroic steed in true heroic fashion, up the side of a wall and around the blob, which is reaching out its tentacles. That's the other thing that this blob has, is tentacle.
That's right.
Which we don't really get in the original. I mean, that would have been hard at the time, but the way they do that here, it also can reach out. It has an extra level of sentience where it can form appendages to reach out and grab people if it needs to. That's kind of cool. And that also, again, requires a lot more setup. Like when you decide, like, oh, we're also going to do tentacles,
puppetry,
process those and reach out for
puppetry.
people and grab them and all that stuff and then make them move. They really had their work cut out for them in making this thing.
Yeah.
That's such a great moment, though. Again, I guess hopefully you've seen the movie and can pump your fists in the air when that happens,
So what you're saying is that he's a cowboy on a steel ride?
Sure. I mean, he's got the hair there, too.
And the blob wants him dead or alive, or just dead, really.
Exactly.
Oh, my God.
Just dead.
Yes.
You're mostly dead.
All right. Let's get our final thoughts on the Blob 1988, and then we'll come around for endorsements, which will be super fun because it's been several weeks since we've had a chance to talk. So, Tony, I mean, I know none of us has had anything negative to say, and there's no reason for you to introduce anything like that now. But what are your final thoughts on the Blob 1988?
I mean, I think this is a classic. It's another example of when people go, oh, what about remakes? You can stack this up with The Fly, with A Thing. It's, if you like gore, this has it. I think it is great to watch kind of back to back with the original, and see where it kind of comes from and what people's different takes are. Seeing how that, the political shift affects it. Again, how fashion, what a small town in '88 is.
Yeah.
As seen through the eyes of, again, you have filmmakers who are older than that. It's like definitely older than me when I watched it, and it still rang true in a way. So that's an example of good filmmaking, right? Where it doesn't feel like, hey, young whippersnappers, you guys like the cool things, right? Like it still resonated in that way. I think that's amazing. Through and through, the cast is great. Yeah, I mean, it still works, and it was well worth getting the Blu-ray version of this so I could go back through everything, because that's something we definitely didn't have. You caught it when it was on tape, you rented it, or it was on HBO, or some cable, which I didn't have. That's another reason when we were hanging out with friends who had cable. That was awesome. Most of that weekend was me just being a TV geek, where I just wanted to watch as much stuff as possible, because none of that was on 3 channels that we could probably get, or maybe 5 channels total at the time.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't also, I living way out from town. I think I said before, we had to pick up channels. We actually had to turn the antenna, which was on a pole that went down to the ground, to pick up stations. So people who had cable, they were like, you were godlike, because you just press a different button and turn the channel.
Yeah.
It's none of that stuff. But yeah, to me also, like I mentioned before, I know it was kind of a long-winded intro, but all of the parts that made this cool hit me at all the right points. And so this is a classic, but it was neat to watch it, in a really nice format with a bunch of extras that I could go back to and really pick things apart. I think that was fantastic. So yeah, and it still looks great. And I think that's partially because it was all done in, as much as possible practical effects. And there's a certain weight and here literally, but there's the way that things interact that will always have that and going for it, even though of course CG can do a lot of the heavy lifting. Like, by no means am I disparaging when it's good, because it's good a lot of times. Stuff that, in TV, there's so much stuff that you don't even notice.
That's
and
right.
They're doing it successfully every day, everything you watch. But there's certain craft to it in here that I just, I love that marriage. You use the tools as you need them, right?
Yeah.
But I just, this still works for me in ways I didn't imagine that they would, and I think that's great.
Fantastic. Julia, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you said nobody said anything negative, but I think I said negative things. But
That's
I
fair.
did
You did,
enjoy
yes.
I did enjoy this conversation a lot. And for sure, I think, like I said, that there's some great effects, great performances. It's just like, like Drew said, if you're not into body horror, you're not. This is not for you, and that's okay. Not everything doesn't have to be for everybody. But yeah, for sure, it's there's a lot of really good horror aspects to it. A lot of really scary moments, and yeah. I mean, having a little kid get killed and having just all the terror is really, it's really effective. So yeah, it does have a good it achieves what it's out to achieve.
Wonderful. Drew, what are your thoughts?
I think that this is if you wanted to do a marathon of The Thing, The Fly, and this movie, I think that'd be an incredibly satisfying sort of throwback 80s monster movie remake marathon. I really like this movie. I think it holds up well. I think the effects are really good. I like the ensemble cast. I wish we had talked more about the creepy preacher, because he's great, and he's the exclamation point on the end of the
Yeah.
movie that gives it sort of a John Carpenter ending. I just terrific monster movie, and there's always room for one of those.
Yeah, I think the other part, it goes into the twist, kind of, we were talking about, is the twist with the priest also goes into the 80s of the mistrust of authority, authority figures being, maybe the church isn't infallible anymore. Like, we're seeing that, and we're seeing some of that small town breakdown as well. That's not the main thrust of this movie, but that's part of it, is a seemingly fairly trustworthy person who, by the end, when there's a stinger, you're like, oh no, this has turned out horribly. And we also see that in again, going back to King, that's kind of that character would definitely fit in any King novel that you could possibly imagine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Very much. Yeah, that's true. It's a very King-esque character. Wow. Thank you, Drew. One thing I wanted to point out is the director here, Chuck Russell, was the executive producer of Hell Night. I know he created a lot of stuff. He made Nightmare on Elm Street, Dream Warriors.
Yeah,
but so very talented. But he was also an executive producer of Hell Night, which is one of my favorite slasher movies. And
oh man, I was watching that over at Max's.
Oh, were you?
A few weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was on when I came over.
It's kind of an unsung. You don't hear people talk about Hell Night much.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's worth checking out.
Yeah, very, very much. So I really love talking about this. I'm so glad we watched it, because I saw the movie back in, whatever, like 91 or something, and it left no impression, none, zero on me. And now today I watched it, and I feel like I'm seeing a totally different film from what I remembered. And I don't know why it left no impression on me. You never know, because that's happened before. Well, I watch something and it means nothing, and the next time I come around and go, wow, I don't know why my eyes were not open to this. But so this time I really appreciated it. So and 30 years later, I can't. It's funny that we're missing a Blob movie that doesn't exist. So
Well, do you think the kids today, because like in the 80s, certainly people were still very aware of the original Blob. Like, do you think the name, the Blob, do you think
No,
that
it would mean
people
nothing. It would have to be, it would just be, it would be this name. And so if you looked it up, you could go, oh, interesting, there was an old one. But you would, just be remaking it because you wanted to remake it. In the same sense that when 21 Jump Street came out, I asked a lot of the young people that I worked with, I said, so is it anything like the TV series? And their number one response was TV series. So no, kids do not know the Blob, and that's fine. Yeah. Let's get our final. No, that's the final house. Let's do the endorsements. So Tony, I have an endorsement about you, but you might have the same endorsement. So go ahead. Do
I don't.
what you're gonna do.
Maybe did something different. I'll let you. Oh, I know what you're talking about. I'll let you have that one.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I'll go with my actual endorsements that I'd come
Okay.
up with. I've been watching. The Arrow had a sale, or was it Diabolic DVD, which is awesome. And I can't remember which way I got these, but I bought a bunch of movies from Japan that I was really interested in, and kind of ended up being a little bit different than kind of Yakuza dramas and stuff like that I usually get, or horror. One was called Giants and Toys, which is basically, it was in 58. So all the stuff that you're kind of seeing in Mad Men is like happening, but in the actual time period it was. And it's the several rival caramel candy confectionery companies jockeying for position and trying to stay on top. And they hire a girl for publicity, and the way they have to do that, and it's kind of interesting because since it's Japan, you're seeing kind of a different way of how there's a lot of differences. There's also the similarities to the ad agency, to how things are run. And so it's like this.
How did you find this movie? This is
It's
a
on Arrow. I mean, I just started
1950s
looking for cool
satire?
things. No, I just started looking for cool things that seemed interesting. And I tangentially met one of the people involved. I think it's Jasper Sharp, if I'm not mistaken. Through working in comics and stuff. And
That's remarkable.
he's done a bunch of work with Arrow on various things, and started hearing about it. And it's a really fascinating kind of publicity. It's corporate intrigue.
Yeah.
And then I follow that up with a disc that contains Black Test Car and Black Report. And Black Test Car is about corporate espionage in the automotive industry in Japan and what people are willing to go through. A lot of this is that driven, like, what are you willing to go through to do stuff for your company?
Yeah.
Is blackmail part of it? Is prostitution, all this stuff, like, but the Black Test Car takes place in the automotive industry. And is it actually Black Test Car and Black Report on the same disc? Black Report is more mystery, but kind of contains a lot of that stuff. But this kind of noir feel. Those two are in black and white, but I kind of been firmly into the corporate espionage of Japan over this past
wild.
week.
That's
and
really wild.
It's cool stuff. I mean, I like a lot of Japanese noir kind of stuff, but it's interesting that this, these are spies, but they're corporate spies, as opposed to cool guy with shades and a gun kind of action that usually happens. And with Giants and Toys, it sounds like, oh, that's kind of weird. It's a rival caramel confectionery companies, but there's still a lot. They all contain the same thing, right? Where you have we need to stay on top. What are we going to do for publicity? Who we're going to get? How does being the it person for a campaign change you? It's like, oh, well, here's this girl, we'll take her, she's relatable. How do we change her into the face of this campaign? And what does that do to the people around you? All that stuff in Giants and Toys is there. And then I think it's not just because it's in black and white, but Black Test Car is actually a kind of darker version of all of that. But yeah, Arrow's really knocking it out of the park as far as all these cool Blu-rays of stuff from Japan that's not just traditional spies and noir stuff, but has that kind of gritty feel. And yeah, it's been great. And I have a bunch of discs of various things, like so I'm firmly in there. But yeah, that's where I've been. Corporate intrigue.
That's pretty cool. Thank you very much. Julia, what about you? Do you have anything to endorse?
Oh yeah, several things. We went to see The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which is the Nicolas Cage Pedro Pascal movie. Oh my God, it is
Yeah.
so funny. I loved it so much. I just really, really enjoyed it. I love Nicolas Cage making fun of himself. I love Pedro Pascal just being just adorable. Their relationship is so great. It's so multi-layered. It's really fun movie. Really, really fun. Great performances by a bunch of people in that film. So I highly recommend it. And then we just have new episodes of Grace and Frankie, which I've always enjoyed. If you enjoy Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda, Sam Waterston, and Martin Sheen, and who doesn't? That's a great fun show to
Yeah,
get caught up on.
we just finished that too.
Yep,
Yeah, I'm
super fun.
trying to parcel it out because since this is the end, I only want to watch a little bit at a time because when it's gone, it's gone. You
Mhm.
know, so it goes. Thank you, Julia. Drew, what about you?
Well, I am apparently the patron saint of lost causes on TV. AMC Plus and Shudder have a TV show that I appear to be the only person who is into, even though it's got decent reviews. It's an Australian production called Firebite. It's got a mostly indigenous cast. It's a vampire show. Sort of Buffy meets Near Dark meets Mad Max would be the vibe that I would say that it has.
Okay.
But it's the peculiar thing about it is that it seems to be getting much more of a marketing push in the United States than it does in Australia. In fact, only one of my Australian friends knew about the show. So I thought it was just terrific. It's like great performances. It's got a really good aesthetic. And if you know, vampires are one of the most sturdy metaphorical monsters in the horror canon. This is vampires as colonialism, and it's an interesting take on it because the only people that hunt vampires are indigenous people, and that is because the British imported vampires from Europe as a form of biological weapon to kill off the people already living in Australia. And that's like the backstory of this. It takes place in contemporary times, but it's just very textured. It's very Australian, which is again why I'm kind of surprised it doesn't get a bigger push in its home country. But I really hope more people watch it. If nothing else, I would like more people to talk about it with, because I loved it. I watched the whole thing within a couple of days. I just couldn't stop watching it, and I hope it gets a second season. I don't know if it will, but I just thought it was phenomenal, and I think that it deserves more viewers.
Thank you very much. My endorsement will be something I have not listened to yet, but I know is going to be wonderful because as of today, Borgo Pass podcast has a new episode on Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman with their guest is none other than our good friend Tony Salvaggio. And I can't wait to discuss it. Tony, was it fun to talk about
Oh
Frankenstein
yeah,
Meets the
well,
Wolfman?
Monster Rally movies, that's great.
I love that one in particular with the Festival of Wine and all that good stuff. I mean, that's a good one.
It
I
is
think
good.
I think that's probably the best
Of the Monster Mashes?
yeah, I really like that. Like to the point where I feel like when I learned you were doing that, I was like, it was a mixture of pleasure because I know I'm going to enjoy listening
And
to
pure jealousy.
Oh yeah, I love that movie. But yeah, I also can't wait to listen to that.
No, I
Borgo
had a
Pass.
blast. And I remember because I watched all three in rapid succession, and then I did the previous one because I thought that was the one I liked the most at the time. And going back through it, again, the transformative nature of cinema when you kind of go back and rewatch things. There were a lot of things that we discussed that kind of hit me differently on this viewing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to spoil any of that. And thanks for bringing it up, Jason. When I kind of realized what you were going to talk about, I was going to plug it, and then I was like, I'm going to let Jason do it. And that also don't sound cooler if I'm not like, hey, like the thing I do, even though not that I'm ever above that. but like it's nicer. It's nicer.
No, I'm with
when
you.
other people bring it up.
I'm not above it either because I'm constantly.
Oh yeah, I mean,
loggerheading,
I'm
you know?
not. I mean, we do that all the time. I shouldn't even
Yeah.
said that.
No,
but
I'm
just-
with you.
It's different. It's
yeah.
nicer when people bring it up. But yeah, it was a blast. You know, again, Jim's been a friend of mine since college, and it's just weird that over the past few years we've reconnected. Which there was a time when I was trying to find a bunch of friends of mine who we used to hang out with, and was having a hard time. And so it's cool that he's a successful writer, successful, he's making films and he's making cool stuff. And I think that's awesome to be invited back from a friend of mine from so long ago, and then just everybody, how it all works out. It's really great. And I love Universal stuff. So
that's cool.
Yeah, no, I
can't
hope that
wait
people
to
check
listen.
it out. And I'm always afraid though, because they have such a cool dynamic going on the podcast anyway, that I mean we're all friends here, but I'm always I don't know. I always second guess myself because I'm always hoping like, oh, worst guest ever, that guy again. And
No,
I don't
I'm
know
sure
why,
that's
but
not
like
true.
I'm always just afraid of that. Like even though I know that you shouldn't think of the worst of things, but it was really cool, and I'm looking forward to doing. We've done 2 now. We're gonna do all 3 eventually, so that's cool.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Cool. Well, that's it. And that brings us to the end of our episode on the Blob 1988. I have no idea what comes next. Literally no idea. We're going to have to go into our old Google Doc where we listed things we're going to talk about and crumple it up and replace it with complete other stuff.
Apparently, I'm the one that decides everything. I didn't realize that until I didn't.
So
realize
Drew, what are we gonna watch? What are we gonna watch next?
I don't know.
So we'll,
I didn't realize I was so powerful.
Well, but the funny thing is, it's a subtle power where you'll just go, I think it would be cool to do this, and we'll go, ah.
Could it be that I just have good ideas?
That and also the rest of us are lazy.
That's the same thing. All of that is.
It all and we're all friends, so it's usually like, hey, I bought this thing, and then we're like, yeah.
I keep the problem is that I'll be like laying around and I turn on and I'll go, and I'll find some random Giallo movie and I'll be like, oh, we got to do this and we got to do this, but then when somebody goes, hey, what do you want to do? Suddenly it all goes out of my head, So I'll be like, oh, Blade in the Dark, man, yeah, that would be a great one.
Sounds like we're gonna have an epic discussion on Messenger this week.
It will be fun. It's gonna be that's gonna be really great. Okay, thanks everybody. Be kind to one another, and can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this discussion. Come to the Facebook page, and we will join you. Bye, everyone.
Night.
Good night.